My name is Lorraine Madsen. I'm 68 years old, a retired nurse, and a widow for nearly a decade. For most of my life, I've been the quiet one in the room, the person who remembers birthdays without being reminded, who stays late to clean up after the party, who holds her tongue even when her heart is breaking. People like me, we become invisible long before we're ready. They said, "You're too old to join us, Grandma. Just stay home," after I paid for the entire trip. And the next morning, I packed without a sound. It happened 2 weeks ago. I wired $7,200 to a cruise line, a surprise gift for my son Brian and his wife Dana. It was their 15th wedding anniversary. I wanted it to be special, memorable. A week in the Caribbean, one of those big, beautiful ships with white decks, blue pools, and endless food. A suite big enough for the whole family, Brian, Dana, their 2 kids, and me. It felt good to do something that big. I didn't tell them right away. I wanted it to be a moment, a joyful surprise. But the surprise was on me. That night, after I emailed Brian the booking confirmation, he called. His voice sounded casual, too casual, like he was trying to pretend this was normal. "Hey, Mom. So Dana and I were looking over the reservation. The room only sleeps 4. And honestly, with the motion and the crowds, we just thought, maybe it's best if you stay home this time. You know, watch the house, water the plants, feed the cats." Just like that, after I paid for the entire cruise. 4 seconds passed. I remember them clearly. I didn't say anything. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and that's why he kept talking, filling in the silence with more justifications I didn't ask for. "You've always been more of a homebody, right, Mom? You wouldn't enjoy the noise, the heat. It's just a trip. There'll be others." But this wasn't just a trip. It was a thank you. It was a hope. It was me trying one last time to be seen as part of the family, not as an obligation or a backup babysitter or a tired old woman they could count on to keep things running in the background. Just for once, I wanted to be included. When the call ended, I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The tea I had steeping went cold. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, not yet. From something colder, like realization. I walked to my bedroom, opened the top drawer of my nightstand, and pulled out a silk scarf. Deep lavender, soft and faded. It was a birthday gift from my late husband, Thomas, the last one before he passed. I'd never worn it. I'd been saving it for something that mattered. That night, I sat at the dining table with a pen and a yellow notepad. I wrote one sentence 3 times. I paid for the entire trip. My name isn't on the ticket. Then I poured the cold tea down the sink, and I made a decision. At 4:15 the next morning, I called the cruise line. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to modify an existing booking. Add a solo cabin, same ship, same dates. Who will be traveling?" "Lorraine Madsen," I said for the first time in years, like it meant something. "No other guests?" "Number just me." By the time the sun broke over the horizon, I had booked myself onto the same cruise my son had asked me to stay home from. Not in their suite, of course. Somewhere quieter, out of the way, but still there. And no, I didn't tell them, because sometimes silence is louder than any scream. The taxi ride to the port was quiet. The driver had the radio on low, some old jazz that fluttered in and out like a ghost at the edge of memory. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind drifted to places I hadn't meant to visit that morning. It's funny how silence opens doors in the mind, the kind we keep locked when we're busy or too tired to feel. On the seat beside me, my lavender scarf was folded neatly. My cabin confirmation rested on top, printed in black and white, sharp as truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't packing for someone else. No pill boxes for Dana, no extra sunscreen for the kids. Just me, and the weight of all the times I'd quietly swallowed disappointment. I thought about Ava's high school graduation last spring. Dana told me it would be a small ceremony and tickets were limited. "We'll FaceTime you," she said, smiling like it was enough. I remember dressing up anyway, putting on a blouse I hadn't worn in years. I even curled my hair, just in case. I watched the ceremony on my phone from the kitchen table next to the dish rack. The video froze twice. I clapped in silence. Later that night, I saw the photos on Dana's Facebook. Her parents, her sister, her brother's wife, everyone beaming in the sunshine, Ava in the middle, holding flowers. I wasn't even mentioned in the caption. Family is everything, it said. A year before that, Christmas Eve, I baked sugar cookies and wrapped gifts like I always did. Dana called 2 days before. We're keeping it small this year, just immediate family, you understand, right? I said I did. That night, I lit a single candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched a holiday movie on TV. I remember the smell of pine and cinnamon and the strange feeling that I had become a guest in my own story. The next day, they posted a picture. Brian holding a turkey, Dana in a red dress, Ava and Luke wearing matching pajamas. Behind them stood a fully decorated living room packed with people. People from Dana's side. No one looked like they were missing anything. Those were just the big moments. There were smaller ones, too. Ones so slight, they might slip past anyone who hasn't lived them. Not being included in the group text for vacation planning, being asked to babysit last minute but never invited to brunch, hearing my name used only when something needed fixing, cleaning, or funding. And every time I told myself, just this once more, just until they're older, just until things settle. But that just stretched into decades. 20 years of waiting for an open door that was never unlocked. You don't notice it at first. How easy it is to disappear when you always say yes. How silence becomes habit. How invisibility becomes identity. I wasn't angry when I booked my own cabin. Not exactly. I was tired. Bone tired. Of waiting to be remembered. Of pretending I didn't mind. Of making excuses for people who had stopped making space for me. They didn't mean to be cruel. At least I don't think they did. That's the part that hurts more than anything, knowing you're not even worth resenting. You're just overlooked. Forgotten not with malice, but with convenience. At a red light, the driver glanced in the mirror. "Big trip ahead?" he asked. I smiled. "Yes," I said. "A long time coming." He nodded, turned up the jazz just a little. The car moved forward. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I looked out the window at the passing city, at strangers carrying coffee, walking dogs, checking phones. I wondered how many of them were also pretending they weren't invisible, how many had also been left out of their own lives. We all have our ways of coping. Mine was silence, service, sacrifice. But somewhere between the last forgotten holiday and this morning's sunrise, something shifted. I wasn't packing for them anymore. This trip was mine, and I was done writing myself out of my own story. When I arrived at the port, the cruise ship looked even larger than I had imagined, a floating city gleaming in the morning light, the kind of place you'd assume was meant only for families, for couples in matching straw hats, for people full of excitement. I didn't fit any of those categories, and yet I was there. I wore my lavender scarf around my neck. It fluttered gently in the breeze as I wheeled my modest suitcase toward the check-in terminal. The same breeze that rustled the hair of toddlers on their father's shoulders and made the palms sway lazily overhead. My hands trembled slightly as I handed the agent my boarding pass, not from fear, from the weight of choice. For once I wasn't waiting to be invited. I had invited myself. They processed my documents without comment. No fanfare, no confusion, just a quiet nod and a plastic keycard placed gently in my palm. Cabin 739, Deck 7, midship. I knew from the itinerary I'd purchased for Brian and Dana that their family suite was on Deck 10. Forward. Far enough that we wouldn't run into each other, unless fate decided otherwise. Part of me hoped we wouldn't cross paths. Another part wasn't so sure. My cabin was simple, compact but clean. One bed, a small porthole with a view of the sea, A folded towel shaped like a swan waited on the bed. I smiled at the silliness of it. No one had ever made a towel animal for me before. I took a moment to settle in, unpacked just enough, hung the scarf on the back of the chair, laid out a paperback I'd been meaning to finish for 5 years, lit a small travel candle, lavender and bergamot. The scent reminded me of the linens I used to wash when Brian was a baby. For a few minutes, I stood by the porthole and watched the crew loading luggage onto the ship. I wondered if Dana had packed her sun hat, if the kids had brought their matching swimsuits. I wondered if they would notice the silence in the suite. One less voice, one less body, one less yes. Eventually, I stepped out into the hall. The ship felt alive already, humming with anticipation. Families wheeled bags, couples pointed at maps, crew members greeted passengers with smiles that had been rehearsed to perfection. I made my way to the elevator, blending into the crowd. On deck 10, I exited without thinking. Something pulled me there, like a string that hadn't been fully cut. I told myself I was just exploring, just seeing the ship. But my feet moved with a memory of habit. As I turned the corner near the atrium, I saw them. Dana stood by the railing, holding her phone up at the perfect angle. Her hair was styled, her smile practiced. Brian was crouched beside the kids, showing them how to work the touch-screen map of the ship. They looked happy. They looked complete. None of them noticed me. I didn't linger. I turned and walked the other way. My scarf slipped slightly from my shoulder as I moved. I tightened it gently, grounding myself in its softness. Down on deck 11, I found the upper deck. Open sky, sea breeze, the scent of salt and sunscreen. A few early risers had claimed loungers. I chose one far from the crowd near the railing where the sun hadn't reached yet. I sat, and for the first time in what felt like 40 years, I simply sat. I didn't check anyone's schedule. I didn't keep one eye on the kids. I didn't fold napkins or refill glasses or ask what everyone else wanted first. I looked out at the horizon, unblinking. The sea stretched endlessly forward, blue and infinite. And for once, I wasn't rushing to be useful. I was allowed to just be. No one called my name. No one asked me to move. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of things I had never claimed. Time, space, breath. Somewhere on this ship, my family was starting their vacation, and somewhere on this same ship, so was I. The second morning on the ship, I took my coffee early, before the families filled the buffet, before the music started pulsing through the speakers, before the announcements about excursions and art auctions. I liked the mornings best. They still felt untouched, like the world hadn't decided who you were supposed to be yet. I found a small table near the stern, overlooking the wake of the ship as it carved a path into the endless blue. The wind tousled my scarf and I let it. I didn't reach for order anymore. Not here. That's when I noticed her. She moved like she'd done it 100 times before. Not rushed, not hesitant, just present. A woman with silver hair cut short and neat, wearing a linen blouse and soft sandals. Her earrings caught the sun as she sat down at the next table, facing the sea, not me. But she nodded. That kind of nod women of a certain age give each other. It says, "I see you. We didn't speak right away. We didn't have to." She sipped her coffee slowly like she had nowhere else to be. I liked that. It reminded me I didn't either. After a while, she looked over and said, "You're not traveling with anyone, are you?" There wasn't judgment in her voice, just curiosity, like someone asking if you'd like more tea. "No," I said, "not this time." She smiled. "Me neither. I find it peaceful." That was the beginning. Her name was Clara, 71, from Oregon, a retired school principal. "I used to think I'd travel with my daughter," she said later that morning when we bumped into each other on the walking track. "We planned it for years, a pilgrimage to Italy, the churches, the vineyards, the coast." I nodded. "That sounds lovely." Clara looked out at the water. Her voice didn't crack, but something in her face tightened, just enough to notice. She left without me, she said, after I'd paid for everything, said it'd be easier to take her husband instead, more romantic. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I helped raise her first child, Clara continued, moved into their home, cooked, cleaned, watched the baby through teething and colic and 2 rounds of flu. They called me a blessing. Until I asked if I could take 1 week, just 1 week, to see Rome. A pause. Then she said it wasn't the right time. That I should be grateful I was included in their lives at all. Clara didn't cry. Neither did I. We just walked side by side, 2 ghosts who had found bodies again. Later, over lunch, she said something I've carried with me every day since. There are people we love who only remember us when they need something, and there are people we haven't met yet who will sit next to us just because they want to. She didn't ask why I was alone. She didn't ask if I was sad or bitter or brave. She just offered half her bread roll and said, "They make them fresh on deck 5. Try the cranberry butter." For the first time in days, I laughed. Not loud, but real. Clara didn't want anything from me. She didn't expect stories or apologies or favors. She didn't ask for a past or a promise. She sat beside me because I was there. That night, I wrote in my journal, something simple. There's power in being seen by a stranger who doesn't owe you anything and still chooses to stay. Clara wasn't my savior. I wasn't hers. But in that quiet space between strangers, something opened. We were 2 women who had been left behind, and now we were learning to walk forward, again, side by side, not behind anyone. It was the 3rd morning of the cruise when my phone buzzed. I had almost forgotten I brought it, not because I meant to disconnect entirely, but because no one ever really reached out unless they needed something. And sure enough, the message read, "Mom, the AC at home is leaking again. Here's the number of the technician. Can you call and schedule him? Thanks." That was it. No. How are you? No. We miss you. No. Is everything okay back home? Just another task. Another assumption that I was sitting in my usual chair, sipping my usual tea, ready to drop everything for someone else's inconvenience. I stared at the message for a long time, not because it surprised me, but because of how unsurprising it was. I looked around. Clara had joined me on the pool deck, knitting something soft and gray. She looked up, noticed the shift in my posture. "You all right?" she asked. I turned the screen toward her, letting her read it without saying a word. Clara raised an eyebrow and then returned her gaze to the sea. Charming. Her needles clacked gently, rhythmic, comforting. "Are you going to call?" she asked, not unkindly. I didn't answer. I placed the phone face down on the small table between us and let the silence carry more than my words ever could. It wasn't just about the message. It was about what it revealed, the assumption of my availability, the belief that I had no life of my own, the expectation that I would always be waiting, invisible until needed. It occurred to me in that moment that Dana didn't even know I was gone, that she had sent that message thinking I was home, as always, folding towels, feeding the cat, paying bills, holding the house together so they could go live their real lives. And for once, I wasn't. I had stepped off the wheel, and no one had noticed it had stopped turning. Clara glanced at me again, as if waiting. I just smiled, not bitterly, not even sadly, more knowingly. "No," I said softly. "I won't call." She nodded. "Good." I took a sip of my coffee, now slightly cold. A breeze picked up across the water, and my scarf fluttered again, almost like it was nodding too. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about ignoring a problem. It was about a shift, quiet but tectonic. For the first time, I had nothing to explain, nothing to justify. They would figure it out or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my emergency anymore. And deep down, I suspected that even if I had called the technician, even if I had done what they expected, they still wouldn't have thought to ask where I was. The invisibility had been mutual, after all. They didn't see me, and I had stopped seeing what I was worth, until now. Clara set down her knitting and leaned back in the chair, letting the sun warm her face. "Funny, isn't it?" she said after a while. "The things they count on us for, the way they forget we had entire lives before them." I nodded. "They think we're support beams, always there, never needing repair." She smiled faintly. "Until one day, the beam isn't there, and the house creaks." We sat there watching the sea stretch endlessly in all directions. No crisis, no noise, just quiet defiance. The kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't need permission. I didn't pick the phone up again that day, and I didn't feel guilty, not even for a second. The night air on the upper deck was warm and salt-kissed. A gentle breeze moved across the ocean, brushing against my arms like soft fingers. The stars above seemed impossibly close, like someone had scattered glitter across black velvet. Clara found me sitting at a table near the railing, a glass of ginger ale in front of me, untouched. "They've got a live band tonight," she said with a smile, nodding toward the open-air dance floor in the center of the deck. "Says they play everything from Sinatra to Santana." I gave her a look, half amusement, half doubt. She winked. "Come on, I didn't pack these orthopedic shoes for nothing." Before I could protest, she took my hand, firm, confident, like she knew I needed help standing in more ways than one. We walked toward the dance floor, two silver-haired women cutting through a sea of sundresses and polo shirts. No one stared, no one whispered. They barely noticed us at all. And maybe that was the point. The music swelled. "Fly me to the moon." A live trumpet carried the melody with surprising grace. Clara stepped first, guiding us into the rhythm like she'd done it her whole life. I followed. I hadn't danced in decades, not since Thomas and I used to sway in the kitchen while dinner burned on the stove, not since my knees were steadier and my heart less guarded. But here I was, rocking gently, laughing softly, letting my body remember what freedom felt like. Clara spun me once, just once. I didn't fall, I didn't feel old. I felt awake. The beat shifted, something Latin now, faster, bolder. A song I didn't recognize, but it didn't matter. Around us, couples moved, young women in heels, teenagers giggling, a father twirling his daughter. Joy pulsed in every movement, and for once, I wasn't watching it happen from the sidelines. I was part of it. Clara and I danced for 3 songs, maybe 4. I lost count. Then, breathless and flushed, we stepped aside. A young waiter in his 20s brought us cold water and a smile. "You ladies are stealing the show tonight," he said, his tone genuine. I laughed, brushing a strand of damp hair from my forehead. "Oh, we're just warming up." He raised his phone. "Mind if I take a photo? You've got the best energy out here." Clara said yes before I could say no, and just like that, he snapped it. One moment of light caught in time. He texted it to me, using the number I gave him. Later, back in my cabin, I looked at it. There we were. In motion. Faces lit by the string lights overhead. My scarf caught mid-twirl, fluttering behind me like wings. Clara's grin wide, her eyes laughing, my cheeks pink, my back straight. I looked alive. Not useful, not responsible, not background. Radiant. For the first time in a long, long time, I saw myself as more than who I was to others. Not someone's mother, not someone's backup plan, not someone to call when the air conditioner breaks. Just Lorraine. A woman dancing under stars, not needing permission, not waiting to be asked, not shrinking to fit. The power in that image wasn't about youth. It wasn't about beauty. It was about ownership, about joy that didn't have to be earned through labor or loyalty, about being exactly where I wanted to be, without apology. I saved the photo. I sent it to no one. Some things aren't meant to be explained. Some moments are just for you. That night, after the music faded and the ocean settled into its lullaby rhythm, I returned to my cabin alone. The lights inside were soft, golden. A calm kind of silence filled the room, the kind that didn't ask questions or offer judgment. Just let me be. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, watching the gentle sway of the curtain near the porthole. The ship rocked softly like a breath inhaled and held. My scarf, lavender and worn from the wind, was still draped over the back of the chair. I reached for it, folding it slowly, tenderly, as if I were touching Thomas's voice again. He'd given it to me on my 60th birthday. Called it your stormlight because he said it made me look like I carried the sky around my shoulders. That was the last birthday he ever celebrated with me. I placed the scarf down carefully, then reached for the small leather pouch tucked into the lining of my suitcase. It held a few private things, an old rosary I no longer prayed with, a pressed flower from my wedding bouquet, and a folded envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges. I hadn't looked at it in years. The handwriting on the front read simply, Brian, no stamp, no date, no address. Just a name I once whispered with hope. I unfolded it slowly. The paper crackled. Kontung lamot jua tre biet kam on, mitung tin vai. You used to be a boy who said thank you. I used to believe that. My hands trembled, not from age, but from everything I had once meant to say. I had written this letter 5 summers ago, when Thomas died, and no funeral was held, no gathering, no eulogy, just a hurried cremation and a 2-sentence email from Brian. We'd love to do something, but the kids are signed up for camp. Maybe we can do a memorial later in the fall. Later never came, and I never sent the letter. But I remember what it said. You used to make paper hearts for me when I left notes in your lunchbox. You used to save the crusts of your sandwich to feed the birds with me after school. You used to ask me if I was okay. And now you speak like you've outsourced your tenderness. I'm not angry, Brian, but I am heartbroken. Your father loved you more than breath itself. He would have waited 1,000 hours just to hear your laugh again, and yet you couldn't delay a vacation. You didn't even call me that week. You didn't ask if I had somewhere to sleep. You didn't ask if I had eaten. I carried you inside me. Then I carried you through every illness, every heartbreak, every fear. But now I can't even carry this silence. Still, I'm not sending this. Not because I've changed my mind, but because I know you won't hear it. And because I'm tired of writing words no one reads. I sat there, holding the letter in my lap. The ship creaked slightly as it moved through the water, like it was exhaling with me. I didn't cry. I had already shed every tear this letter could possibly hold, but I did something different this time. I folded it gently, pressed it flat, and slid it back into the pouch, without bitterness, without ceremony. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it away, because it was real, because it was mine, because silence had been my prison for too long, and just reading the words again felt like breaking the lock. This time, I wasn't going to write another letter that would never be sent. I was done speaking into the void, and for the first time in decades, I felt the quiet say something back. The morning after I read the letter, the one I never sent, I sat by the window in my cabin, letting the sun creep in slowly. Something inside me felt quieter. Not calmer, exactly, but cleaner. Like I had poured out something old and heavy, and now there was space. Raw, yes, but open. I hadn't planned to check my phone. I'd left it off since that technician text, unwilling to open the door to more requests or empty niceties. But habit is a hard thing to kill. I tapped it awake out of muscle memory more than intent. That's when I saw it. A single message. Not from Brian, not from Dana, from Lena. Grandma, Mom says I shouldn't bother you while you're taking a break, but I just wanted to ask, are you okay? Just that, 12 words, and yet they hit harder than all the silences I had swallowed for years. I stared at the screen for a long time, the pulse in my wrist quickening just slightly. Lena. My granddaughter, 17 years old, always watching from the corners of family events, always sketching something in her notebook instead of scrolling on her phone. She had Thomas's eyes, kind and curious, and she had my stillness, the kind that listens before speaking. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What do I say to a girl who still sees me as more than just someone who picks her up from soccer or knits her scarves? After a few deep breaths, I began typing. Sweetheart, thank you for asking. I think, for the first time in many years, I'm not okay, but I'm free. And that feels like something important? I hovered over the send button, then pressed it. Almost immediately, the bubbles popped up. You look different in the photo you posted, strong, but also like you're holding something. I keep staring at your face. That confused me. I hadn't posted anything. Then it clicked. The waiter must have shared the picture from the dance floor, probably with a tag or story that somehow reached Lena's feed. The internet is a strange, porous place. Another message followed. If you ever have time, I want to draw you. From that photo, I've never seen anyone look both beautiful and sad in the same breath. I want to understand it. That one made me cry. Not loud tears, not broken ones, just slow, grateful ones. Because for the first time in what felt like decades, someone in my family wasn't asking me to do something, fix something, be something. She was asking to see me. Not the version of me who showed up with grocery bags or babysitting offers, just me. I typed back, I'd love that, Lena, truly. Let's talk when I get back. Then, after a pause, I added, you always saw more than most. Keep looking. No emoji, no signature, just words. Real ones. Clara found me on the deck an hour later. I told her what happened, reading her Lena's messages. She smiled, that knowing, slow smile of a woman who's seen too many disappointments to be easily moved, but still chooses to be. She sees you, she said, not as an echo, not as a helper, but as a woman. I nodded, and for once I didn't feel the need to explain why that mattered so much. I just let it matter. That night, I looked out over the ocean again, and this time, it didn't feel like I was drifting. It felt like I was beginning. The email came at 6:43 a.m. I was already awake. I had been for hours. Something about sleeping on water changes your rhythm. Or maybe it was that my body, for once, had no obligations to wake for. No laundry pile, no errands, no pan clattering from the kitchen. Just a quiet hum beneath the floor and the distant hush of waves against metal. The notification blinked on my phone screen. From Brian subject. Where are you? I opened it slowly. No rush, no anxiety, just curiosity. Mom, we're back. Came home last night. House was empty. No groceries, no cat food. Lena said you're not staying there anymore. What's going on? Please respond. We're worried. This isn't like you. The irony made me exhale through my nose, a sound that might have passed for laughter if anyone had been near enough to hear it. This isn't like you. No, Brian. This is like me. It's just not the version of me you're used to, the one who answers on the first ring, who keeps the fridge stocked and the trash out and the calendar clear for your emergencies. That Lorraine? She didn't pack a suitcase in the dark. She didn't wear lavender scarves to dinner. She didn't dance under stars with strangers, and she definitely didn't leave without a forwarding address. I sat with the email for a long time, didn't respond, didn't delete it, just let it sit there, like a stone dropped into still water. Clara arrived with 2 cups of coffee. She didn't ask if I wanted one. She just handed it to me, black and warm like she knew. She caught the look on my face as I handed her the phone. She read the email in silence. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened slightly on the cup. Well, she said softly, that took longer than I thought. I smiled faintly. "They're worried," I said. "Of course they are," she replied. "Silence from someone who's always spoken is louder than any scream." She set the phone down between us. "Are you going to answer?" I didn't look at her, just stared out over the water. A single sailboat dotted the horizon like a punctuation mark in a sentence I hadn't finished. "No," I said, "not yet." Clara nodded. She didn't press. We sipped our coffee, listening to the deck creak as the ship turned slightly into the sun. Then after a pause, she asked what no one else had ever asked me, not in all my years of carrying the weight of other people's comfort. "Do you want to forgive him?" I turned to her. There was no judgment in her voice, no bait, just space. I thought about it, about Brian's first birthday, the way he used to grip my pinky when he was scared, the time he broke his leg at 12 and cried into my lap for an hour, the first time he told me he hated me, at 17 over curfew and cigarettes, and the way he apologized the next day with a single daisy plucked from the neighbor's yard. I thought about the years since, the fade, the reassignment of my name from Mom to Help, the shift from person to placeholder. "No," I said quietly. "I don't want to forgive, and I don't want to punish." Clara tilted her head. "Then what do you want?" I took a breath. "I want to choose my silence, after years of having it forced on me." The wind tugged gently at my scarf again. I let it. I want the right to not answer, to not explain, to not be summoned like a fire extinguisher every time someone else starts a blaze. Clara raised her cup in a toast. "To chosen silence," she said. I clinked mine against hers. "To power in stillness." And as we drank, I felt it settle inside me, the knowledge that this time they were the ones wondering. They were the ones refreshing inboxes and checking voicemail. And I was exactly where I needed to be. The final night on the ship always comes with fanfare. They call it the Captain's Gala, though the captain rarely shows. It's mostly champagne flutes, string quartets, and couples in formal wear trying not to spill on themselves. I didn't bring a gown, just the same navy blue dress I wore to Clara's birthday dinner on the second night. Soft cotton, high, neckline, sleeves just long enough to hide the part of my arms I never liked. But tonight I added something else. My lavender scarf, the one Thomas gave me years ago. The one I'd worn only once before this trip. And now, somehow, it had become the thread tying all of this together. It had danced with me under starlight. It had been held by ocean wind. It had caught tears I didn't realize had fallen. I wrapped it around my shoulders carefully, then stepped out. The dining room was grander than usual. White linens, tall candles, waitstaff in tuxedo vests gliding between tables. I walked in slowly, letting my eyes adjust to the golden light and the hum of conversation. A young host approached with a practiced smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Table for one," I said gently. "But may I request a table for 6? He blinked, clearly puzzled. "Of course. Will your party be joining you later?" I shook my head, smiling. "Number, I just want a bit of space. And please don't clear the extra chairs. I'd like them to stay." He hesitated only a second before nodding. "Absolutely, ma'am. Right this way." He led me to a long table by the window, dimly lit but elegant. 6 places set with gleaming silverware and folded napkins. I took the seat at the far end closest to the ocean. The other 5 chairs remained untouched. He left. I sat in silence. Then slowly I took the lavender scarf from around my shoulders, and I draped it gently over the chair across from me. No one said a word. A passing server paused, just briefly. Her eyes flicked to the scarf, then to me, and then she moved on. I poured myself water, unwrapped the small roll of bread, took a bite. Around me, people clinked glasses, laughed, took photos. But I wasn't alone. That empty chair, draped in stormlight, wasn't a symbol of loss. It was a declaration. That space had always been there, unseen, unacknowledged. Tonight, I named it. I let it take its place at the table, the space for the things unspoken, for the woman I used to be and the one I was becoming, for every conversation I had with myself while waiting for someone else to ask how I felt. That chair held memory, grief, silence, and it held dignity. Not everyone would understand, but that didn't matter anymore. This wasn't for anyone else. After my meal, I sat quietly for a while, sipping tea. The scarf stayed in place. I never reached for it. Letting it sit there was an act of courage I hadn't known I needed. The waiter returned eventually, eyes soft. He gestured toward the plate across from me. Should I clear that one now? I smiled gently. No, I said. Let it rest a little longer. It's waited a long time to be seen. He nodded once, then backed away slowly, like someone leaving a chapel. When I stood to leave, I didn't take the scarf with me. I left it there, draped across the back of that empty chair, glowing lavender in the candlelight. A witness, a marker, a vow. Some things aren't meant to be carried forever. Some things are meant to be released, not erased. And that night, I left something behind, quietly, but forever. Clara found me on the observation deck the morning after the gala dinner. I was leaning on the railing, a mug of tea warming my palms, watching the early mist roll across the endless blue. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me in silence, her presence calm, familiar now. After a while, she asked quietly, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why didn't you say anything? When they told you to stay home, after you paid for the trip, why not scream? Why not fight?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't a single event, or a single heartbreak. It was years, decades, a quiet undoing. So I began slowly, almost unsure if I'd ever said it out loud before. Back in 1992, I said, Brian had just been accepted into university. He was so proud. So was I. But then he found out there was a funding shortfall, $1,000, maybe more. I stared out at the water, remembering the tiny kitchen in our old house, the hum of the fridge, the scent of instant coffee. Thomas had already passed, I continued. All we had left of value were memories, and a pair of diamond earrings, my wedding earrings, the only real jewelry he ever gave me. Clara turned her head slightly but said nothing. I didn't tell Brian. I just went downtown, walked into a pawn shop and sold them. Quietly. Got enough to cover the tuition gap and a little extra for his books. I swallowed. He never knew. He still doesn't. He thought it all came through a scholarship or grant, and I let him believe it. There was a long pause. I was proud of that, you know, I said. Back then, I wore that silence like a medal, like it proved I was a good mother. Clara's voice was gentle. But now? I took a deep breath. Now I see it differently. I turned to her, eyes steady. I see that every time I gave without being seen, every time I erased myself so someone else could shine, I was teaching them that my needs didn't matter, that I didn't matter. I looked down at my tea, and I don't blame them entirely, not anymore. I trained them, Clara. I trained them to believe that I was the giver, the fixer, the one who always stayed behind. Clara didn't interrupt. She just let the words unfold. So when Dana said there were only 4 spots on the cruise, and it made more sense for me to stay back and watch the cat after I'd paid for the entire thing, they weren't being cruel, not exactly. They were being conditioned. I paused, letting the weight of that settle in my chest. I conditioned them. Clara nodded slowly. "And now?" she asked. I smiled faintly. Not a bitter smile, just weary. Now I've stopped. I didn't fight because fighting would have been me asking for permission again, and I'm done asking. I turned back to the sea. I didn't board this cruise to confront them or teach them a lesson. I boarded it to remind myself that I exist. Clara placed her hand gently over mine, just for a second. That, she said, is the loudest answer of all. We stood there for a long time, no more words, just the sound of the ocean and the quiet understanding between two women who had given too much for too long. Morning light poured through the sheer curtains of my cabin. The final full day. Most passengers were bustling around, packing suitcases, confirming transportation home, making sure they hadn't left chargers in the wall or books under the bed. Not me. I stood barefoot on the balcony, the floor cool beneath my feet, and let the sun warm the top of my head. No rush, no checklist, no one waiting for me on the other side. Clara knocked gently before entering. She'd gotten used to not needing an invitation. She was holding a small paper cup with a tiny umbrella poking out, pineapple juice and a dash of something stronger, even though it was barely past breakfast. "Celebratory?" I asked, smiling. She shrugged. "Or preparatory. Depends on how you look at it." I nodded. I understood. We sat on the balcony, the soft rumble of the ship beneath us like a heartbeat. Clara sipped from her drink, then asked, "You packed already?" I shook my head. "No." "Need help?" "No," I said again, softer this time. "I'm not packing because I'm not going back." She turned to me, surprised, but not shocked. I continued. "I booked another ticket last night, Martinique, just for a week, or maybe more. I don't know yet." I looked at her steady. "I just know I'm not ready to return to the same four walls. Not yet." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she exhaled and looked out over the water. "You know," she said, "I asked myself this morning, when we dock tomorrow, do I put my armor back on? The apron, the calendar, the quiet apologies?" She took another sip. "Because it's easy to slip back into it, being useful, being predictable, being invisible." I reached for her hand. "You don't have to," I said. She looked at me, really looked, and something behind her eyes shifted. "I want to come with you," she said, "but only if I can sit next to you on the deck and not behind you in the kitchen." I smiled. "That's the only seat available." We both laughed, quiet and free, and just like that, it was decided. Two women, long underestimated, long overlooked, were about to chart their own course, literally, not for rebellion, not out of bitterness, but because freedom, once remembered, is impossible to forget. I thought of the scarf, still draped over the chair in the dining room. A part of me had considered retrieving it, but no, it belonged to that moment now, just as this one did. We sat in silence, the kind only two people who've known pain and peace in equal measure can share. Then Clara said, almost to herself, "We spent so many years giving everyone else the front seat." I nodded, and they never thought to offer it back. Clara raised her cup. "To being the main character," she said. I tapped mine against hers. "To never shrinking again." And as the horizon widened before us, we didn't make plans. We made a promise that wherever we were going next, we would choose it for ourselves, not to prove anything, not to punish anyone, just to live. 2 weeks later, I came home. There was no welcome sign, no car in the driveway, no message waiting on the kitchen counter, just the same creak of the gate, the familiar scent of pine needles lining the front porch, and the slow hum of the refrigerator that had been with me longer than any apology. The house was clean. The cat had survived. The mail was stacked neatly by the door. 1 envelope from the electric company, 3 coupons I would never use, and a card from the pharmacy reminding me it was time to renew my calcium prescription. I made tea, the same cup, the same chair, and yet nothing was the same. I didn't unpack right away. I didn't check my phone. I didn't feel the need to announce my return. I sat in the silence, and it wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. At around 5 o'clock, the sky outside turned the color of quiet gold. I was halfway through a book Clara had lent me, something about strong women in small towns, when I heard a knock on the door. 3 soft taps. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I saw her. Lena. No fanfare, no dramatic music. Just my granddaughter, in a hoodie, hair a little messy, backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked at me like she wasn't sure what she'd find. I looked at her like I was afraid to hope. "Hi," she said, voice small. I nodded. "Hi." Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. No hesitation, no explanation, just warmth, sincerity. She was taller than I remembered. Her embrace was firm, like she needed to know I was real, like she needed to anchor herself to someone who hadn't disappeared. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were glassy but steady. "You're still you," she said quietly, "but I've never seen you like this before." I didn't know what to say, so I reached for her hand, and in that simple touch, something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not apology, just recognition. She followed me inside, kicked off her shoes, sat at the kitchen table like she had when she was 7, asking for chocolate milk and stories about Grandpa. I made her tea instead. She didn't ask for anything else. We didn't speak for a while, but I saw her watching me, carefully, lovingly. "Mom said you just left," she said eventually. She was mad. I nodded. I didn't leave to hurt anyone. I left to find myself. Lena nodded too. "I get that, more than you know." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a sketch pad, flipped to the middle, held it up, a charcoal drawing of me, on the cruise ship, wind in my hair, the lavender scarf trailing behind like a ribbon of defiance, my gaze not toward the camera but toward something further, somewhere freer. It took my breath away. "I drew it from the picture you sent me," she whispered. "I hope that's okay." I didn't trust my voice to answer, so I just nodded. Again. She stayed for dinner. We didn't cook much, just heated soup and shared crackers, but it tasted better than anything I'd had in months, because she was here, and for the first time in a long time I felt seen, not needed, not relied upon, not taken for granted, just seen. As Lorraine. Not just Grandma, not just Mom, not just the woman who pays or stays behind. Lena looked at me before she left that night and said, "I don't know how the rest of the family feels, but I think I needed this. Needed you. Like this." She kissed my cheek, held my hand a second longer than necessary, then walked out into the twilight, and I stood at the door for a while, not waiting for anyone. Just standing in the fullness of the moment. Because sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly with soft footsteps, a sketch pad, and a hug that says more than words ever could. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I decided to write the letter. The tea kettle whistled, low and steady, and I let it sit a few seconds longer than usual before pouring. The jasmine blend filled the air, soft and familiar. The kind of scent that felt like memory, but not pain. I sat at the table with a blank sheet of paper and a pen that had waited long enough to be used for something that mattered. No shaking hands, no racing heart. Just me, my voice, and the clarity that only silence and distance could bring. I wrote slowly, but without hesitation. "Dear Brian, this is not a letter of anger. If you're reading this hoping to find a confrontation or a dramatic outpouring of resentment, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I'm not angry, but I have changed, and that deserves a voice. For many years, I was the woman who filled in the gaps. I watered your plants. I watched your children. I paid for dinners I wasn't invited to. I stayed home so others could leave, waited so others could arrive, and adjusted so no one else had to. I did it quietly, with love and with hope. Hope that eventually someone would look back and see me standing there, silent, but essential. That day never came, and then came the cruise. I paid for it, as you know, and you called me to say the cabin was full, that I should stay home, watch the house, water the plants, feed the cat, like always. Only this time, something inside me didn't nod. It didn't apologize. It didn't make excuses for your oversight or justify your wife's comfort over my place at the table. This time, I sat with that silence, and it said something I had never dared to say before. I don't belong here. Not like this. So I went. Not in protest, not to spite you, but to remind myself that I still exist outside of service, that I can wake up without being needed, that I can be seen, not for what I give, but for who I am. The trip changed me, or maybe it returned me to myself. I danced, I laughed, I sat alone and felt whole, and I met people who saw me as Lorraine, woman, traveler, soul, not just as mom or grandma or babysitter or backup plan. I'm writing to tell you this. From now on, if you wish to see me, it must be as a son visiting his mother, not as someone giving orders to the help. I no longer live in the role you've carved for me. I live in my own skin now. I don't owe explanations. I won't ask permission, and I will no longer shrink myself so others can stretch. There is still love here, but it comes with boundaries now. If you can meet me within those lines, great. If not, I wish you well anyway. You will always have a mother. But I now reserve the right to choose how I show up in that role. Attached below is my new email. No phone number. I don't need the constant pings. But if you truly have something to say, write. Words on paper carry weight. Just like this letter. Mom, I reread it once. Not to edit, but to feel it land. Then I folded it. Slipped it into an envelope. Sealed it with calm. On the back, I didn't write, love, always. I didn't have to, because it was there, in the lines, in the silence, in the choice to write it all. I walked to the mailbox and let it drop inside, not with trembling, not with vengeance, but with peace. I'm sitting in a small cafe overlooking the water. There's a breeze this morning, gentle, playful. The kind that doesn't ask permission to lift a strand of hair or carry away a thought mid-sentence. The sun's rising slowly over the horizon, turning the sea into molten gold. Around me, couples whisper. A child tugs at her father's sleeve. A woman reads a book, smiling at something only she understands. And me? I'm wearing my lavender scarf, for the first time. It rests lightly against my shoulders, not tied tightly. Not hidden in a drawer, waiting for a special occasion. Just there, exactly where it was meant to be. A waitress brings over my coffee and smiles. You look lovely this morning, she says. I smile back. Thank you. I feel like myself. She doesn't know what that means, but I do. Clara sent me a postcard from Spain. She met a painter in Granada. Says he reminds her of Hemingway and heartbreak, and that's all she needs for now. I can picture her there, wide hat, red lipstick, laughing too loudly in a street market. Her words on the card read, "Don't let the wind pass without dancing in it." She would say that. Lena sent me a drawing. It's me again, but different this time. She titled it, "My Grandmother," with wind in her hair, and eyes facing forward. No caption. Just that. But it said more than any email I've ever received. The drawing sits next to my journal, which I've just closed after writing the final line of this chapter. I want to read it to you. I was never too old. I was just never asked if I still dreamed, and now I don't wait for the question. I go. There was a time when I waited for invitations, for validation, for someone to say, "We see you. We want you here." That time is gone. Now I go, where I want, when I want. Not to rebel, but to reclaim. The scarf I wear isn't just a gift from my late husband. It's a reminder that love, real love, never asks you to disappear. It wraps around you, softly, constantly, willingly, and I carry that now, not as a relic of who I used to be, but as a flag of who I've become. This is the last entry in my journal for this trip, but not the last trip, not the last morning where I order coffee and watch the light dance across a coastline that doesn't belong to anyone. I may go to Greece next, or maybe Morocco, or maybe nowhere at all. Maybe I'll just sit in this cafe again tomorrow and start a new page, because I can, because I choose to. And before I go, let me speak to you, the one listening to this. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.